Melissa Constantine with DATV. We're here at the Dayton Vector and Air Show, and we are with Sky Soldiers, and we're with Rick Welch. So Rick, can you tell me a little bit about the Sky Soldiers and what the organization's all about?
Sure. We're a nonprofit organization. We're out of Hampton, Georgia, which is about 30 miles south of Atlanta. And we have 3 of our Hueys here and 1 Cobra out of 4 Hueys and 5 Cobras that we have at our hangar. And we come to Dayton every year. It's our biggest event and it's our biggest fundraiser, because since we're a nonprofit, our ride program is probably our biggest revenue producer in order for us to keep these helicopters going.
Wonderful. So if folks are coming out this year or even next year, because we will be airing this throughout the year, promoting the air show, what can people do to expect when they get on the ride? How much is it? And is there any kind of age limit? Is it okay for handicap folks that are in need, special needs, that they could also ride?
Sure. To start with, for the Huey rides, we ask a $60 donation for each rider. We can carry up to 10, weather permitting. Sometimes if it gets a little hot, we may have to knock that down to 8 or 9. On the Cobra, we can carry 1 because it only has 2 seats, and obviously the pilot has to be in one of those. The Cobras, we have 2 different rides. One's an 8-minute ride on average. The other is about a 14-minute ride on average, and one is $275 and the other is $475. The uniqueness of these is they're not just helicopters. These helicopters are no longer used by the Army. They were replaced by more modern helicopters, the Apache and the Black Hawk. But the Huey specifically, is the icon of the Vietnam War. So there's a big connection with all Army veterans, but specifically the Vietnam veterans that we see out when we go to the different air shows. And that's one of the things that we all love to do, is to make that connection again.
That's wonderful. So how did you become involved with the organization?
Well, my particular story is I live about 6 miles from the hangar, and I've known they were there for a long time, but I didn't have enough time in the job that I had, obviously, to really produce and perform in the organization. So when I had that opportunity, that was the first place I went. So I've been in the organization about 4 years, and I'm the administrative director, so I'm there all the time, and kind of keep the doors open and keep everything running.
Okay, so for more information, how can anyone contact you by website or Facebook or phone number?
Our website is www.armyav.org, and all the information is there, our phone numbers, our address, and everything. And when you call, I'll be the one answering the phone.
Okay, well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Rick.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
This will just be temporary. Is Tom done? Yeah. Clear. Girls, how you doing over there?
Good. Where's the first
Code 2 is 64.
Okay, so they were behind the pilots. Where's the pilots? When you take a first aid, what's like a symbol of first aid? Well, that's they're dead. One there, one there. What did you say the part?
as Bill Shepard approaches for his first pass. Initially, the Tuskegee Airmen were not allowed to escort bombers and were sent only on low-priority missions like strafing ground targets. These types of missions kept them from finding enemy aircraft and scoring victories against the enemy, a further effort by the military higher-ups to prove they could not do the job. However, when they were finally allowed to escort missions, the Mustang's agility and power let them succeed beyond anyone's expectation. From your right, let's look for the strafing pass, 400 miles per hour. If you're diving at a locomotive in Italy or Germany, that's the last thing that the enemy wanted to see, the flying C-model Mustang. The Tuskegee Airmen destroyed over 125 of the enemy's locomotives and 600 boxcars and sank a German destroyer. In addition to strafing, the airmen performed bombing missions carrying two 500-pound bombs on their P-51C Mustang. Diving from high altitude to avoid ground fire, the Tuskegee Airmen destroyed over 80 motor transports, 10 radar installations, and 23 factories with those bombs and machine gun fire. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Bill Shepard in the P-51C doing its 30-degree angle dive bomb run. All right, CAF Red Tail Squadron flies this Mustang to create interest in the history. And Bill Shepard coming in from your left, setting up for a 30-degree descent. This is the bomb lob pass. The story of the Tuskegee Airmen is one of courage and persistence. They set a goal to be the best Army Air Corps pilots they could be and met that goal. The CAF Red Tail Squadron's new Rise Above Traveling exhibit tells the story of the Tuskegee Airmen by showing a film about them called Rise Above. The movie shows how the Tuskegee Airmen were initially shunned by the white bomber pilots because of the color of their skin. The airmen endured a lot because of the military's segregation policies. However, when they finally were given their chance, the airmen's performances became legendary. They never sought personal fame for themselves by chasing after enemy aircraft. Rather, they earned their reputation and their medals by sticking close to the bombers they escorted and protecting them from enemy fire. As a result of their discipline and training, the Tuskegee Airmen built one of the best escort records in the U.S. Army Air Corps. Because they were so successful, white that's why you see the word fly request. Take another piece of P-51. Both were flying requests the white bomber pilots paid to the Tuskegee Airmen. As escorts, the airmen destroyed over 400 enemy aircraft. Look straight ahead now, and to your right as the Mustang comes in for the photo pass. Nearly 1,000 black pilots received flight training at the segregated base of Tuskegee, Alabama, while over 14,000 black personnel trained at Chinook Field in Illinois and other bases. 445 fighter pilots and their crews operated as a segregated combat unit group in North Africa and the Mediterranean and finally in Europe. 66 Tuskegee Airmen gave their lives. 32 were captured as prisoners of war. The airmen were awarded over 850 medals, including the Presidential Unit Citation, the highest award that can be given a military unit. This is a story of incredible courage and patriotism. The Tuskegee Airmen were willing to serve and die for their country, not willing to serve them because of the color of their skin. Their amazing accomplishments are reflected in the 6 guiding principles that the CAF Red Tail Squadron uses in their educational mission. Aim high, believe in yourself, use your brain, never quit, be ready to go, and expect to win. These are the messages we can benefit from, don't you think? The Rise Above Traveling exhibit is here on the grounds of the Dayton Air Show, and I encourage you to stop by to see the movie and learn more about the Tuskegee Airmen. By the way, that exhibit is here and it is free. Now, let's quiet down and listen to the sound. This particular engine cooled with a radiator like your car or truck, and the coolant that keeps the engine cool. The enemy knew that if they shot that radar and the coolant leaked out, the engine would get hot, it would F-16, and you had an airplane with a ground-flight ratio of a falling cement block. The P-51C Mustang Tuskegee Airman has been restored twice and is operated by the volunteers of the Commemorative Air Force's Red Tail Squadron in Minnesota. The Commemorative Air Force is the largest flying museum in the world with over 140 aircraft, mostly World War II vintage, located at more than 100 wings and squadrons all across America and around the world. Now, Bill Shepard is continuing to work his way around as we have another historic airplane ready to take off on the runway. All right, providing escort will be the Red Tail Rise Above P-51 Mustang, and on the runway getting ready to accept that cover over the top is the only flying B-29 in the world today, known as Beefy. It is Humana, one of Ohio's largest medical insurance providers that are sponsoring the B-29 this weekend. Humana is excited to be a part of this year's air show. Long-standing relationship with active duty and retired military men and women, and the Health and Benefits Company continues to find new ways to support our community. For more information on Humana's Veterans Initiative, visit Humana-Veterans.com or visit one of our two air show centers located near the pavilion. That's one place. Or next to the B-29 aircraft when it goes back on display after its flight. Humana brings us the B-29 today. Now let's tell them about this magical airplane that helped end the war in the Pacific at the end of World War II. The B-29 Super Fortress was rushed into duty without prototypes, as I recall, with 4 huge engines on the front, each of which generated about 2,200 horsepower. They were Wright Cyclone engines. They had 18 cylinders. They were turbocharged. It had a range of over 4,000 miles and could carry a full load, maximum load weight of over 140,000 pounds. It was advanced in so many ways, initially serving in the Pacific and being able to deliver their bombs on target from remote bases far from Japan. And it was also the B-29, 2 of them, one of which is on display at the National Museum of the United States Air Force. It's called Boxcar. It dropped the second atomic bomb. It was on Nagasaki on August, I believe, 8th. Of 1945, just a few days earlier, the Enola Gay, taking off from the island of Tinian on runway Able, dropped that first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. It was at that point that the war came to an end after those 2 huge bombs were dropped. Now, many people have said, but it killed so many people. I would submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki stopped the war and literally saved millions of lives. Now, Rob told you the airplane was rushed into service. First flight was in 1942, introduced and given to flight crews in 1944 towards the end of the war. It had a range of 4,100 miles, and unlike the B-24s and the B-17s that were freezing cold for the crew members inside on the long missions, this was pressurized and it was warm with boosted control. And it had that long range necessary to get to the enemy's heartland. Now the Rise Above P-51 Mustang is going to do a flight formation like it did for the B-17 and the B-24 4-engine bomber crews as they went deep into enemy territory and reduced the terrible attrition rate on those daylight bombing raids. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 heroes of the sky. I think we should just listen to the sound of 5 engines and appreciate the men who flew them. It came at a massive cost in development. You might remember from World War II the Manhattan Project. That project had a budget of $4.3 billion. The B-29 was more expensive than that. That's how necessary it was. Each airplane ended up costing the government $605,000. And when you contrast that to the B-51 that is flying cover for the B-29, that airplane came in at about $50,000. So you can see the awesome amount of difference. It is organizations like the original Confederate Air Force that got this airplane out of China Lake and was able to fly it for many years. Then catastrophic engine problem, deemed it unsafe, until the miracle of miracles happened and American technology and generosity took over. As the B-29 comes in from your right, ladies and gentlemen, will you get ready? As the crew on board lines up the aircraft, they'll also be looking down at the spectators as they give you a little left bank turn to fill up your cameras. Wave like crazy to the crew, if you will. Thank you to all the volunteers of the commemorative Air Force. Ron's going to introduce the crew to you. The pilot, Mark Novak from Omaha, Nebraska. The co-pilot, Niels Agather from Fort Worth. The engineer, Don Thurston. The right scanner, Karen Landis. The left scanner, Terry Singer. And the AP2 operator, Joe Kelleher. It takes a lot of people to run this airplane, but one of the big advancements, in addition to pressurization to keep the pilots and crews warm, was a very unique fire control system that could be operated by one person sitting under a small bubble in the top and could assign each gun to other operators unheard of prior to that time. Another one of the developments that made the airplane successful was relatively short-lived. It had one purpose and it accomplished that purpose, so it was pretty much reduced or eliminated from the inventory, retired, I should say, in 1960. But before that time, used by the United States Army Air Force, and then used by the Air Force after it was started in 1947, and also used by the Royal Air Force. All right, we're in on the last pass, and then we're going to take the airplane back to the spectator area. I want to remind you, as the award-winning Aeroshell team taxis out, they're brought to you by Tuskegee. I'm pretty sure we'll talk more about that. Humana brings you the last pass of the B-29 coming across the trees, low and to your left. Able to get up high where the enemy fighters couldn't get them from below, but ultimately switched to low-level bombing. There is a significance of the name Fifi. You heard about one of the pilots who is Niels Agather. Well, his father, Vic Agather, in the military, had spent a lot of good times and bad times with the B-29 during World War II. And it was his direction and his help to cut through the red tape and get the airplane out of the military inventory and into the hands of civilian operators to bring it to air shows like this. One of the pilots is Neil Agather. We're talking about his father who helped so much. Then, if that wasn't enough, Route Rider, Vic Agather put money out of his own pocket to keep the airplane operational. So that's the reason for the A on the tail. Vic Agather is the father of this airplane. That's the military red tape because he knew how to get guided this airplane through World War II. That's the A in trouble. Will never be removed. His son is now flying in the right seat of the airplane. Now, the name Fifi? Well, Vic Agather's wife, Niels Agather's mother, her real name is Josephine. And all her life, she had a nickname that you might guess is Fifi. So as a tribute to that family, that name will probably never change either. Now, the B-29, folks, is a flight engineer's airplane. He has got more levers, more switches, more dials, more on-off switches, more medium switches, more spring control switches. He's the guy that is busy. When the pilots call for a power setting, it will be the engineer that moves the throttles and the RPM on the engines and not the pilots. They'll have their hands on the throttles, but they'll be calling to him. They look out of the cockpit. right about it now, as they set up at their target speed. I'm just going to guess. I may be wrong. Let's try for 130, 130 knots. The power is probably at this weight. RPM is set for 2,400, and the power is, I'm going to guess, I may be way wrong, probably 26 inches of manifold pressure on all of the engines, maybe 28. Now they'll be looking for that speed. If it increases, the pilot will say manifold pressure 26. And if it still increases manifold pressure 25. That's a reduction in power. And as he gets slowed up, he'll say, okay, manifold pressure 24. So he's got 2,400 RPM and 24 inches of manifold pressure. That is a wag. It may not be exact. Now they're going to want to come in over the trees at a specific altitude to be able to touch down on the numbers, as they say, about 1,000 to 1,200 feet down the runway. As they slow up, you'll see that nose gear come up. In a non-stabilized approach, you'll see the nose gear lower than the main gear. That's unusual for today in a jet because they use the stabilized approach in a nose-high attitude. As the pilot comes in, they continue to tweak the manifold pressure and not necessarily the RPM.
Mark Novak at the controls, the flight engineer not facing forward.
All right, now the pilot will come in with a big handful of trim, and he'll have the throttles. He brings the throttles back against the stops. He continues to trim. The main gear touches down, and then the nose gear touches down, and that's the way you fly a B-29. Let's reintroduce that crew, Rob Ryder. They did a magnificent job with that airplane. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, and thank you, too, to who else but our sponsor, Humana, for bringing that airplane here.
The pilot, Mark Novak from Omaha, Nebraska. The co-pilot, Niels Agather, the grandson of the man who gave it the name. Engineer Don Thurston, right scanner, Karen Landis, left scanner, Terry Sanger, and the APU, the auxiliary power unit operator, is Joe Calberer, and touching down behind it, the red-tailed P-51 flown by Bill Shepard, representing the Tuskegee Airmen and the Rise Above exhibit. Ladies and gentlemen, your commemorative Air Force at work, preserving the aircraft that gave us our freedom today. No.